Wow, it's been so easy using Anchor for my podcast needs. I can edit it very easily on my cell phone. I can also use it on my computer, which is great. I can upload new pictures for each podcast if I need to. And the thing that I really appreciate it as a fledgling podcaster is that it's free. So I highly recommend it. Hello, and welcome to this episode of EQ Above IQ, Parenting with Emotional Intelligence and Healing the Inner Child. My name is Trina Casey, and I'm your host, and thank you for listening. On this episode of EQ Above IQ, I'm going to be talking about the fifth principle of social skills. And the reason why I've chosen to talk about this particular principle is because of the current state of the world and how vital being able to do a particular skill within social skills is. That particular skill is called conflict resolution. How we do conflict resolution? First, we have to identify what the conflict is. And that's something that's really been missing in the current state of affairs. There are lots of people who are going around it, and this skill is going to be so vital for your child and for yourself for the rest of your life. So I'm going to outline some things that we can do to make ourselves more socially aware and to be able to repair, if not just solve, most of our relationship problems. And that's all kinds of relationships. That's relationships with your personal family. That's relationships at work. And I know a lot of these things are going to seem rather common sense. So why don't we do them is going to be the question. And I know the reason why we don't do them. And it's because we don't do the steps before that. The steps before, which are self-awareness, self-regulation or management, motivation, finding out what we really want and what drives us, what our purpose is, and compassion. So I want to just talk about a few of the other elements about being socially competent or have the skill to be able to tune into another person's emotional state and feelings and truly understand how they think about things. It's not just being kind of yes, 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 I understand, but truly trying to go within ourselves to go, how did they come to this thought pattern or this opinion about something that I disagree with? It's not just being like a very chatty person that can get people to like you. It's really more about being a collaborator, a team player, being able to negotiate, because sometimes no matter what the conflict or disagreement is, you're not going to always be 100%. You're not going to be agreeing with somebody, and you're not always going to get what you want. So you need to be able to find a middle ground, which I think politically is one of our hugest problems right now, is that quote unquote adults, like I said, we're all children walking around in adult suits, who are currently in charge of what's happening globally, are unable to negotiate in a way to get into the other people's minds, feelings, and hearts. They just want their way, like petulant children who stomp their feet and say, it's me or nothing. And that's the furthest thing from empathy. So, this skill solves so many of the problems because it starts with your ability to be self-aware first, to understand why you're triggered, what's going on in your body. Or is your heart beating faster? How do I calm that? How do I regulate that? And then what is my motivation? What do I want out of this? What is the purpose? Why am I doing what I'm doing right now? What is my belief? Because sometimes your belief is not always attached to your motivation. It's just, sometimes it's separate. And then how can I be compassionate and have empathy for the people who disagree with me, because they obviously are feeling the same way that I do. And this is something that we have to teach our kids, how to do this. Now, I'm starting with how to resolve a disagreement because I think that's kind of the root. Everything that happens, we disagree. I say it's green, you say it's blue, when actually in the middle, it's somewhere in the middle, it's blue-green. Okay, so let's get to the point where we can both agree that it's blue-green and not dig our heels in to say, no, it's green, you just can't see, and no, it's blue, you what are you, crazy? Let's get out of that situation. And there's certain things that the steps that we need to take, of course, go along the lines of emotional intelligence. Okay, so identify and deal with your emotions. So, when you're in an argument with someone, things get very heated. And that's when somebody is getting so emotionally worked up, you have to deal with that first. You have to calm yourself. You have to regulate yourself. Where the other person's not going to hear you and you're not going to hear the other person. I call this the timeout stage. Especially in romantic relationships, I always had a habit of saying, okay, I need to calm down first before I talk to you. So I'm going to go take a break. And you do this with your kids as well. This is really helpful when you're totally dysregulated and you can't get it together. You're just going, I can't. Okay, so I'm going to time out. I'll come back in a minute. And then once you're finally calm, and you're in the, right headspace, you can identify what the conflict really is, before you start going into trying to resolve it. So let's agree what the problems are first, so the purpose of solutions are that they're mutually beneficial. And please try to be sympathetic to any concessions the other person may be unwilling to make, but be sure to stand firm on your own. So it's not about giving in to what you feel is right, but it's more like going, okay, I hear you. I'm listening. I want this to be resolved. I want us to come to a resolution that is mutually beneficial. So I'm going to have to give up this. Okay. And you're going to give up this. Okay. Great. So basically back to the blue-green. Okay. So I do see how you can see that there's some green in there. Okay, well, I can see how you think there's some blue in there. It's a little tiny blue when I look up the colors, different spectrums of colors, and I use that because it's a silly example, of course. There's so many ranges of blue and so many ranges of green, and on the color wheel, they kind of can bleed right into each other, but you know what I mean. And one of the most important things is that you end on a cooperative note, whether it's in any area of your life, whether it's business, whether it's pleasure. Try to end on as positive of a note as possible. Doesn't mean you won't be a little bit disappointed that you didn't get your way 100% or anything like that. But actually, in the end, you will feel better when that person, namely your child, is smiling at you because they felt heard. And I think that's really the biggest piece about conflict resolution. And I wish they taught this in school more. I wish they taught kids to sit down with each other, look into each other's eyes after they've calmed down and they stop being in their amygdalas and fighting or screaming, whatever the case may be. After they have taken their more than 6 seconds usually to stop the cascade of emotional chemicals, I wish they would sit those kids in front and say, okay, let's identify what the problem is here. You wanted the ball and this person took the ball, but you think you had the ball first and this person took the ball after. Okay. So the problem is that you both want to play with the ball and you can't at the same time. And then you go through the process of, is this ball special or is it just a ball? Well, one of them says, well, this ball is firmer and it bounces better and it's why I like it. Yeah, that's why I like it too, the other person may say. Well, okay, What if we found another ball that was exactly the same? Would you be happy? Usually that would make them happy unless that's not the problem. And usually that isn't the problem. Problem has to do with a need to feel more powerful or conquer the other person or feel a lack of control. Because somewhere in their lives, as most children feel, they don't have a legitimate feeling of validation and that they matter and that they're listened to. You remember when you were a child. You remember you're still that child walking around in an adult suit trying to figure things out. So that's where we kick in our ability to have some empathy towards that particular situation, towards our child in any situation, and adult child in front of you. It's just letting that person know that you want the same thing as they want, to be happy at the end, and that you'd like to see them happy too, is a really positive way to end on that situation. So, but as a teacher or somebody who's helping mediate situations for kids, really letting them identify what the real issue is so vital for those kids to later move forward and have a cooperative, friendly relationship rather than an adversarial one that brings out that trigger every time as much as possible. And I've seen that so often. And it's amazing to me once you kick on a child's ability to have empathy for another kid, how they'll do it. They do it naturally, really. Kids have this inborn empathy, but they also have this inborn tyrant. And being able to get them to identify the differences between the two through cooperation, through physical sensation, but it's a practice. And if you're not teaching this, they lose such a valuable life skill into adulthood. And I don't see it. I don't see it in the classrooms. I've constantly tried to teach it to my child. But, his response is it just doesn't work with them. And I can see what they mean. It's because, you're raising your child in a household that says my way or the highway. How are they going to be able to go outside of that and know how to negotiate their needs? How? Of course, there are times when, a bedtime routine, for example, you have to go to bed. Okay, yes. Because if you don't go to bed, you're going to wake up tired. And it's going to be hell in the morning. There's also ways to negotiate even around that. And one of the things that I do is, because I think most children at a certain age start to try to prolong that time they need to sleep, I usually get my son to do something that is a part of what he needs to do anyway, but it also gets him to stay up a little bit later and say, okay, well, if you want to stay up a few more minutes, you can play the piano, because he needs to practice. He doesn't like to practice, so I get him to practice the piano, and that usually works. But sometimes that doesn't work either. Or I look at the clock and I try to get to start that routine a little bit earlier because I know I'm going to have so much pushback. And I've had several conversations. What is it about going to bed that is so difficult, or that you don't want to do it? Because it leads up to me having to know I have to go to school. And I said, okay, so the problem is not actually the bedtime. The problem is the wake up time. And he doesn't really want to connect that the wake up time is connected to the bedtime. So, you can only do your best with getting them to see certain things. When it starts to really, really become a problem, you have to find a way to negotiate around that. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to go to bed. Are you hungry before you go to bed? Yes, always hungry before he goes to bed. Would you like something that's like some teas and chamomile? Whatever. Eventually, they always get there, right? Anyways, I really want us as parents to work on this social skills part within the home, because the children that we're sending out into the world are going to need to use those skill sets to create the world and the society that they're living in. Very rigid. I don't believe in very rigid authoritarian. I believe in boundaries. I believe in listening, trying to get them to figure out why they do what they're doing. Sometimes depending on a certain age, there is no way around that, in that because of where they are developmentally in their brain, they're just kind of little narcissists, but that time fades as well. We all go through the I, me stage. And the problem is when we don't do anything to counteract that, and we just give in and we give in and we give in. I feel like a lot of the problems that we have is that we have raised a lot of people who are unable to see the other person's side. We live in a very narcissistic society. I'm reading a very good book by Ken Wilber. And, he has his proponents and he has his naysayers. But what I really like about it is that he is seeing this wholeness. He is seeing the possibility of integrating all kinds of belief systems, all kinds of ideals about science and biology and everything in together. Because the truth is, it is all together. One was born from the other, The truth be told, religion was born from paganism. And science was born because they were trying to disprove the religion. And then the ladder goes up and up and up. What if there's some truth in all of it? And we just haven't connected the pieces of the puzzle yet. And if we spend more energy trying to connect the pieces of the puzzles rather than refuting and saying one is wrong, what if we just try to negotiate and resolve the conflict by working together to prove what is true rather than what is false? I'm just saying there is a pathway to integrate and to embrace all things. And not all things are meant to be integrated. Like, I don't want to integrate murder. I don't want to integrate molestation. I don't want to integrate certain things that I know that are harmful to us as a species, as a society. I want to take the things that I've seen as positives and integrate them together so that we can become a whole of society. One of the things that is very good for creating social skills is playing games at home with your kids, creating opportunities to problem solve together when it's not something negative. I'd like to, can you help me out? Try to figure out how to do this. What do you think is a good way to going about doing A, B, C, and D? I did that the other day with him. I said, I need some help to figure out how to do something. And kids love it when you admit, or you say you admit, that you don't know how to do something, because that gets them in problem solving mode. And they feel so good about themselves and so accomplished at the end when they've come up with a solution that you can feign ignorance about and say, oh, yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. Or that's interesting. I never thought about it in that way. It really triggers something in their cognitive abilities for problem solving, but also feels really good to see that they helped solve the problem. And not necessarily wasn't about what they caused. They didn't cause the problem. So it's just something, it's important. And so you need your social skills. They need social skills when, you're meeting new people or socializing with people of different mindsets. And that's a huge issue right now. So we have tons of divide because of the things that I previously just mentioned, but we're not really working on solutions in a calm way. So let's all take a deep breath and try to find a way to be more emotionally intelligent around conflict, just everything. I just posted a video on my Instagram talking about self-love and how important it is to embrace yourself at every stage of development, because as we get older, our body changes, the way that we look changes. It doesn't mean you don't exercise and do healthy things, but I'm just saying you're never going to look the same as you did when you were 18, unless you're one of those people with those really good, fast, I don't want to say good, just fast metabolism. Some of the people who actually probably wish they had more curves, you always want what you don't have. So I did it because I realized I spent a lot of years being programmed to think gray hair was a negative thing. That, because our shelf life as women are based on how attractive we are or how young we look. It's BS, I think that I love seeing older women with their gray hair and their vivacious attitudes. And that's because they truly are radiating self-love. And I think they're the most beautiful women on the planet. And that goes for men too, So stop trying to be something else than you are right now in the present moment. I give up the hair dye, I don't need to dye my hair. I earned my grays. You earned, women, us mothers out there, we earned our little pudges that will probably never be as flat as they were before birth, or the stretch marks that are, lines of pride because it carried a healthy child in your belly, or for the men that are losing the hair because, one reason or the other is genetic or it's stress or whatever. These are your markers that you're still here. And many people are not here anymore. And I think of young Breonna Taylor, who unjustly was murdered. And I'm heartbroken at the verdict that was made by the AG of her state. And as more and more proof comes out, we'll see as truth will be revealed. But it's heartbreaking how there's no accountability for actions. I don't care who or what position you are in. There needs to be accountability in order for the mistake to stop the mistake from repeating itself over and over again. So I send my love and blessings out to her family, who I'm sure are very pained, and all the people who in my community who are very pained by this very unjust verdict. That is very clear. And thank you to all of the allies who see it as well. This is not a political issue. This is a social issue. So we need to kind of take the politics out of this. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you all so much, and I'm grateful for the emails and the messages in regards to the podcast. I can't believe this is the end of season 1. I will be starting season 2 after a brief break. So next Tuesday, there won't be a podcast. I need to take care, do some self-care, as I always encourage. But I promise to be back in a couple of weeks to record season 2. And that season, we're going to get a little bit deeper into actual families and dynamics. Also, a lot more healing work. And thank you so much. And please go to thisreallifebooks.com. I can use your support around the children's books that teach emotional intelligence. And of course, if you need some help, if you need some guidance, I'm here as a cognitive behavioral therapy coach, and I can help you wade through the many questions you have about your healing process and how to bring your family closer. So I do hope you have a blessed day.